Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dread Time Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia, and tonight our story comes from the literary series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's tale, The Wendigo. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Later, he found an Indian who needed money badly and agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake, and for 3 days they hunted, but had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent, listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still, yet he could hear the wind howling. And the more he listened, it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in the corner of the tent with his head buried in his arms. "What is this about?" the hunter asked. "It's nothing," Defago said. But the wind continued to call to him, and Defago became more tense and restless. Defago, Defago. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet and began to run from the tent, but the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. "You can't just leave me out here," the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my feet! My burning feet of fire!" Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down toward the lake, and then out onto the ice. But soon he began to notice something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long, no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out into the middle of the lake, but they disappeared. At first, he thought Defago had fallen into the ice, but there wasn't a hole. Then he thought something had pulled him off the ice into the sky. But that made no sense. He stood there wondering what happened. As the wind began to pick up again, it was howling just as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice coming from above, and again he heard Diego screaming, "My fiery feet! My burning feet!" But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave this place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. He left some food for Defago and started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since. "Maybe it was the Wendigo," one of them said, and laughed. "It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky and drops you." It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. Do you know anything about him? No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. Are you all right? He asked. No answer. To get a look at him, the man lifted the Indian's hat and then screamed, for there was nothing under the Indian's hat but a pile of ashes. That was the Wendigo. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. Like I always say in closing, check under your bed, look in your closet, and sleep with the light on. The life you save may very well be your own. Good night, everyone.